All right, welcome back to Burt Basics. My name is Peter Burt. I teach at Box Elder High School, and today we are doing Reflex Arc, which I think is kind of fun. So let's go ahead and start with this. Okay, let me get rid of my face. Pow! Okay, get ready. Oh, I guess we can start with this. These are the things I'm supposed to teach you today. What a reflex is, what a reflex arc, all the parts of a reflex arc, and how they go in order, and you need to go in the correct order. Yippee skippy. Got it. Let's start with the greatest movie of all time. Ta-da! If you know what movie this is right away, then you are awesome. If you don't, then you need to go watch it. This is Home Alone. I love this movie. So, this guy's breaking into the house, okay? He's trying to climb up the stairs, and the little boy put tar, I guess, all over these stairs, took off his shoes, took off his socks, and then the next step he takes is that one. He put a nail in the center of the stair. So as soon as his foot stepped on that nail, this is when we're going to talk about reflex arcs, because this is going to be, he's going to receive this information, and then woof, we talk about reflexes, and he screams and falls down the stairs and yells. Then it gets even better, because then he's like, oh, I can't go up those stairs, and notice he has no socks and no shoes, so he decides to creep into an open window, where the boy strategically has placed lots of glass ornaments. Just looking at these pictures makes me laugh. This is such a good movie. So then he comes in, he steps on all the glass ornaments, and he breaks them. Oops, he breaks them all into his foot, and he starts screaming again. Guys, this is what reflex arc is all about. Now, everyone always is going to argue what's the difference between reflex and muscle memory, and I'm going to argue that the difference is conscious thought and conscious perception. A reflex is something the human body does to protect ourselves, to avoid injury, to avoid damage, and it's really not as complicated as everyone makes it sound out to be. So let's go ahead. As much as I'd like to talk about Home Alone, we should probably talk about anatomy, and you're going to get pictures like this. So let's go through each one. As soon as you get any kind of stimulus, that's where the reflex is going to start. So let's say you do step on a nail going up some stairs. You need to have a reception. You have to receive this information via the dendrites to the cell body, and then it has to travel on the axon. Now in step 2, you know sensory information has to travel from the site of where the injury happened to the brain and spine. That's what sensory do. Sensory are afferent. They're always sending it to the brain, to the spine, to the brain, to the spine. So let's go and draw an arrow going in. That was the worst arrow I've ever drawn. So we have some kind of receptor, then we have the sensory information. Now, we talked about in other videos, there's a difference between white matter and there's a difference between gray matter. We argue that gray matter is where all the processing takes place. The spine has gray matter, which means it can make a decision or correct the problem on its own. If it does, we call that a spinal reflex. Okay, if the brain does it, the brain can do it too. We call that a cranial reflex. If I consciously have perception, thought, or reasoning in my greater lobe, so then I'm going to call that more muscle memory. But this is a reflex arc. I have some injury happening here. I need to fix it as soon as possible. Now, don't get me wrong. I could send it up to the brain. The brain could create a process, figure out what it wants to do, and then send a signal back, but that would take some time. So in this case, I do send it up to the brain so the brain knows what's happening, but then I send it out on step number 4, which is a motor. You guys know a motor is going out, right? That's going out, and it only talks to what we call effectors. If you've had my class, you know the effectors are only 2 things. Effector is going to be a muscle or a gland to solve the problem. So if you touch a sharp tack, then your effector is going to be like, move, and this is what we call a reflex arc. The whole purpose of a reflex arc is to try to inhibit damage. So the number one things we talk about is we talk about pupillary reaction. We talk about your foot when we talk about Babinski reflex, when we talk about newborns where we rub the soles of their feet just to see how their reflexes are. The most common one you're familiar with is just sitting on a table with a rubber mallet. Well, the rubber mallet hits your patellar tendon, patellar ligament right underneath your knee, poop, and your leg bounces, and you're like, hey, that's really cool. Okay, that's what a reflex is. So when we look at a reflex arc, let's look at our pieces again. We have to have a receptor 1. We have to have a sensory neuron to tell the brain 2. Now let's talk about the neurons in the brain. Okay, we have to process this in the brain and spine, right? This is central nervous system. And if you go back here, the nerves in the brain and spine are called associative or interneurons. I love the word inter. Inter means between. So it's between sensory and motor. I actually don't even mind the word association or associative nerves because they associate the information so they can process and figure out what they want to do. And then a motor neuron will leave talking to effector. And remember, anytime you talk to an effector, you should have a 1 and a 2 here. Effectors are always muscles and or glands. Those are the 1 and 2. So no questions on this one, guys. This was just a short video. Try to explain reflex arc. Thanks for watching Burt's Basics, and I'll see you on the flip side.